Chaos can always be expected as hung municipalities elect mayors. Now that's according to Power to Truth host JJ Tabane. This comes after the eThekwini council sitting was disrupted yesterday. Now, the day's blue flag is flying over Cape Town, Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni. The party's new mayors are taking office in the metros. But in two of them, the election is thanks to smaller parties who just don't want to see the African National Congress in power. Let's unpack this further with the political analyst Oliver Dickson. Oliver, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Mfundo.
Interesting developments yesterday. Some of us didn't expect what we saw happening in Johannesburg as well as Ekurhuleni. Your take on just what happened in these two metros?
Yes, it certainly would be unexpected. Herman Mashaba today explaining on a competitor news platform how these negotiations had transpired, explained that it actually happened yesterday morning only after a phone call he made to Julius Malema saying, look, I don't want the ANC to be in power, but there's something we can do here. He proposed something to Julius Malema yesterday only, and they both agreed to it, and calls were made to the various caucuses across the various councils, and that would be in Tshwane as well. A similar conversation is happening in eThekwini, in Newcastle, and those conversations are playing out in council. We should see a similar result happen in Tshwane today. I know that council meeting is happening right now.
But we're calling these conversations not agreements. And if they're not agreements, then these governments remain very, very fragile. That's a conversation I was having with a colleague of mine, Bule, a bit earlier, that they're very fragile. And at this point, we could see what we saw in 2016, where at any point we could see vote of no confidence, we have a new mayor, and so on. It continues, but all of this to the detriment of ordinary citizens that just want to see services delivered.
In my latest Business Day article, which went out a few hours ago, I paint two possible scenarios that could play out here. The one is one of fragility, where the DA is beholden to the EFF and Action SA, and it's very clear Herman Mashaba brings along with him Julius Malema, which is something the DA expressly said that they would like to avoid, right?
Exactly.
But yet they find themselves in exactly that situation. So it's not cause for celebration just yet across the DA benches in those three cities across Gauteng. That's the one scenario, Mfundo. There's a second possible scenario that's also very probable, and that is that Julius Malema and Herman Mashaba may fall out of favor. It is quite clear that it will come to a point where the city's program of government cannot be passed. That is to say, a budget cannot be passed because they can't get a majority vote on a budget. If there's no budget, there's no functioning city. And it will come down to who the more stubborn between the two are to hold out the longest. And it's quite clear that these politicians, both Herman Mashaba and Julius Malema, have been known to go back on their word very erratically, very petulantly, and oftentimes surprise us, just as they have surprised us yesterday. They might surprise us in one of these city councils when a budget can't be passed, for instance. That might cause a fracture between the two of them, and the DA can consolidate power within the crevices between the EFF and Action SA. Similarly, it may bring the ANC back into power if it swings the other way around, right? Because it may well be the case that these two power brokers either decide to go their separate ways, Action SA continuing to lend their support to the Democratic Alliance, or the EFF lending their support to the ANC. And if they can scrape together enough of those one-digit parties at the bottom of the ledger, that's to say, if they can get the Patriotic Alliance, if they can get the African Independent Congress, if they can get the African Heart Congress, if they can get Al-Jamaa well, and the IFP to vote in one or other direction, which the EFF has successfully done in the past before, as we would have seen in Nelson Mandela Metro Bay, where they've been able to do that, right? Although it seems that the bridge between the EFF and the Patriotic Alliance is an insurmountable bridge at this stage, but they may be able to make those negotiations happen, meaning that the ANC can come back 2-3 years into this term, similarly as they have in the previous administration. And it may well be the case that the EFF and Action SA stick this through till the very end because they have a bigger goal in mind. That means that the DA will continuously be beholden to those two parties, unless, of course, the DA can agree to a program of government and a budget in congruence with that program of government.
Spoke of. This is what John Steenhuisen spoke of a bit earlier in that press conference, where he was stating that now they're looking to reach out to these political parties. But the interesting part for me is that At this point, what could they negotiate on? Because they've stated everything, everybody's cards was on the table, and it seemed they couldn't find each other. So I'm wondering at this point, the only thing that would make them cooperate or to stabilize those metros is perhaps if some of these political parties had a vested interest, and that's the MMC positions. Do you see perhaps the DA looking to give some of these political parties those positions?
They certainly will make those offers. Herman Mashaba already said he has no interest in serving as an MMC under Mpopalate's council, mayoral council. Similarly, we know the EFF is not after position, so that's not something that the Democratic Alliance can broker. They can broker that with parties that have made it clear from the onset that they are about power sharing in as far as positions are concerned. That would be the Patriotic Alliance. So they can only negotiate on issues, substantive principles and issues, right? That's to say, make it clear that the budget must be pro-poor, for instance, as they've previously called their EFF Herman Mashaba budget in the previous administration, a pro-poor budget, a budget that focuses on the most disenfranchised parts of the city, of all three of those cities across the province, right? A budget that speaks to a program of governance that has been set up by the Democratic Alliance, set up by the EFF as well as Action SA. The Democratic Alliance is more than welcome to contribute to that program of governance, but if it's not a program of governance that these parties can agree to, then it will not happen. An issue that's thorny between the two of them is the issue of insourcing. The Democratic Alliance simply does not believe that it's a feasible solution, or at least they stated that previously in the past. Today, we don't know what their position is on that.
Capacity being the issue. Capacity being the issue. But if you had to talk to me about the relationship between the ANC and the EFF now, I remember that Julius Malema stated that, you know what, when it was time for negotiations, the ANC brought a very junior team. But you had the likes of Paul Mashadile, who's a top 6 member there. I don't quite understand what was necessarily the issue, or the fact that they couldn't agree on the spot. And many people have even criticized the ANC that some of the demands by the EFF were in fact your Nasrec resolution. So by refusing, you actually are refusing to implement some of your own resolutions. What do you make of that? And now we have Mzwandile Masina being collateral, as Malema puts it.
It's interesting because Mzwandile Masina and Julius Malema are actually really good friends. This is well known, and here Julius Malema snubbed his own friend, right? Which he negotiated for just a week ago, by the way. We would recall that part of the offer that Julius Malema put on the table a week ago was that Mzwandile Masina retains the mayorship chain in the city of Ekurhuleni while they take Tshwane and Action SA will take Johannesburg, and that could not pass the muster of Mashaba's filter. That is to say, he blatantly refuses to work with the ANC and never will, right? Obviously, the EFF has not forgotten that they're in fact an opposition party that exists and was born out of weakening the ANC, and to snub Mzwandile Masina, to snub the ANC in any other part of the country, as they have done in Newcastle, as they have done with the IFP. They're busy doing that in Durban at the moment, is part of their program of action. That is to say, to weaken the ANC, and they continuously do that. The ANC, what you see there is a failure of its own politics. It's not a failure of Julius Malema's demands. It's the failure of the ANC's own politics, as you rightly put out. Like land expropriation without compensation is part of your own party's resolutions.
And nationalization of the South African Reserve Bank. This is their position.
What the EFF put on the table this time around, as opposed to 5 years ago, is the only difference is 5 years ago it asked for the removal of Jacob Zuma, and this time around it's not asking for the removal of Cyril Ramaphosa as president of the party, but everything remained the same, and the EFF and the ANC did not budge.
We seem to have run out of time. The IFP and the ANC, that relationship there, what do you make of it? Because it seemed that it was dependent on outcomes from the NEC meeting that took place yesterday, because we know what their demand was, that Mangosuthu Highway must remain. You cannot change it to Griffiths Mcenge. But it seems whatever happened in there, the NEC meeting, translated into something completely wrong, and then we get an announcement that the IFP is pulling out of eThekwini. So that compromises Mxolisi Kaunda. What do you make of the dynamics there with the ANC?
One or either both the parties there negotiated in bad faith, right? But that bad faith is not bad faith that existed, that was inspired yesterday. This is bad faith that exists beyond our democracy, preceding our democracy, in fact. It is very seldom the case that the IFP and the ANC can see eye to eye, not on issues, but on positions and cosmetic stuff, right? That is to say, the naming of a highway, for instance. That is to say,
it speaks of his legacy.
Right, your expression of the politics related to the identity of the people that form the basis of the IFP's constituency. So it was naive of us to assume that these people can actually find an amicable solution that will look past those issues when they really can't. This is a party that's shaped in the likeness and the image of Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who wants to leave a legacy that is shaped around that, right? And the ANC simply cannot pass a program of governance shaped in the likeness of Mangosuthu Buthelezi,
and here they were. It seems that they wanted to have some sort of agreement nationally, whereas you're going to see implementation at the bottom, where people of Ekurhuleni really don't get along. It's very difficult.
I just want to say this, Mfundo, in 30 seconds as we wrap this up. What we will see is tumultuous governance in local municipalities across the country over the next 5 years. This can be undone and can be avoidable. The DA has been outsmarted in the city of Johannesburg because now they're beholden to these two parties. The only way the DA can remove itself from there and restore democracy is by refusing to constitute a government and saying, let's go back to the polls and let the people vote once again until we have a majority government, right? Having a runoff is not an anti-democratic exercise. It in fact consolidates democracy.
It will be interesting to see how that develops. Thank you very much. That's Oliver Dickson, political analyst, talking to us on the developments around these key metros, that being Johannesburg as well as Ekurhuleni, and what we're possibly going to see in Tshwane and in eThekwini. To this now.